Hello, hello. I am so glad that you're here today. Today, we're diving into something that is super practical, something that I hope you can start to implement today, even in your homeschool with your own kiddos. We're going to look at the three choices, creating flexible, strength-based learning. So it's good to feel strong, right? It's good to feel like you're doing well. We want that for our kiddos too, okay? So today, I'm going to just start off with a little bit of who I am, who you're learning from today. I'm Melissa Muir. I am a trained teacher. I'm also a homeschool mom of four. I've spent 16 years in public, private, online, and homeschool education, so I've seen a lot. All right, I've worked with a lot of different kiddos, and I am a current online teacher and guide over at Curio at thinkcurio.com. We offer lots of online classes and printable curriculum. I'm a licensed teacher in the state of Virginia, but I currently live in Quito, Ecuador with my husband and our four kids. And I like to think of myself as a teaching maven. A maven is somebody who's excited about something, who has found something good and wants to share with others. That's what I want to do with you today. All right, you coming along with me? I hope you are. We're going to keep things fun, practical, and effective today. So hold on to your hats. Here's the plan. All right, we have 4 stops on our little journey today. First, we're going to talk about who we're teaching. Now, you know these people. They're your own kids, right? But the idea of really taking a look at who we're teaching and the privilege that we get as homeschool parents and grandparents to really dive into who these individuals are and meet each one where they are. Okay, the second thing is the lost art of wonder, the fact that we don't necessarily need to give command. We can ask questions and model that wonder for our learners wherever they're at. Okay, from little kids up to big kids. Please hear me when I say this works across the ages, all right? The third thing is why I love hotel breakfast. Now, maybe you love hotel breakfast too, and maybe you already know where I'm going with this, but I'm going to share with you those 3 choices there, all right? And number 4, what's required versus what's needed. Take your hands like this. If you're watching, go ahead and take your hands. This is the baseline, what's required. Maybe what is required by your state or locality as a homeschooler, and we're going to go way up to what's needed. All right, this is what your particular learners need. So let's take a step back and look at who we're actually teaching. Now, if some of you are had a previous life as a teacher in a school setting, you'll know that a group of learners requires a lot of management, right? You gotta meet the needs of 15, 20, 32 kids in one of my classrooms when I was teaching in public schools, and it's hard to meet all of those needs. But when we have a handful of kids, we can really, really understand each one and hopefully work with excellence to meet them where they are. Okay, so these types of learners, who are they? Well, I bet you're gonna kind of bing, a chip in your brain is gonna go off and say, oh, that's my kiddo, that's who I am teaching. Okay, so kind of keep your mind open when you're hearing these. All right, so we could have a successful learner, right? These are our box checkers, the ones that are like, yes, I will do everything that you ask, right? We might also have a challenging learner. They want to know why. They question authority, and they might be a little bit divergent, possibly neurodivergent, but a little divergent from what you've asked them to do. They're off on tangents, okay? They could be underground, right? Middle school girls are really good at this. They have these talents, and yet they don't want anyone to know them. They just want to kind of subsist and like move along and kind of fly under the radar. So could be underground. We might also have some labeled learners. Potentially, if you're coming from a school setting, your learner might have some sort of IEP or 504 plan. This is just the action plan to get those needs met, whether they need larger type or longer time or something else, right? The list is endless, but those labels can help us. They don't necessarily dictate how things are going to go, but they can be really helpful. Okay. We might also have a double labeled learner. What? How does this happen? Well, it could be that your child is referred to as 2E or twice exceptional, meaning they have some sort of exceptionality. This could be giftedness, this could be physical, emotional, or cognitive challenges. So make sure to keep an eye out for those because it doesn't necessarily dictate how they're going to learn. It just helps inform how we're going to provide some choices later on. Okay. Now, we are now going to get into some stated and unstated needs. Stated needs are going to be some of those labels that we discussed earlier. If you know that this is an issue for your learner, please, that is a stated need. Make sure that they get what they need. However, there are unstated needs that come up, and here's the fun part, they change like maybe every 10 minutes. So you gotta pay attention to these. These could be fatigue, stress, hunger, fear, all of these things that you probably have the means to address, right? We might need a snack. We might need a nap. We might need some time outside. We might need just kind of a change in direction, right? Giving them the option to try something else first and then come back to it. Okay. So this needs to be met with understanding and grace. And, how can you be that teacher today? Remind yourself you don't have 32 kids probably that you need to meet the needs of. You just got these 7, 4, 3, 1 kids that need you. So be that teacher for them today. All right. Let's go ahead and get into areas of giftedness because that can also inform who we're teaching. I'm getting these areas of giftedness from davidsongifted.org. If any of these sound interesting to you, please head over to Davidson. They've got some great resources for gifted learners. But areas of giftedness, these could be intellectual. You've got a kiddo who just remembers facts. They have a great memory. They're curious about things. Those are your intellectually gifted learners. We might have an academically gifted learner. I know that was me, somebody who knew the system and could address what was required of me really well and come away really successful, and yet maybe not as curious as our intellectual learners, right? We're just interested in the system. So keep an eye out for that. We might have some creative or artistically gifted learners. Creative might be problem solvers, your engineers, your architects, the kiddos who are building cool things with Legos or getting these build boxes to make robotics type things. Could be coding as well, or you're artistically gifted, visually artistic, musically artistic, physical artistic expressions, right? Dance, things like that. These are other types of giftedness. And then finally, leadership, gifted leaders. This is a leadership, a gifted style, a gifted kind of manifestation of how they are showing their giftedness. So a very interesting thing to keep an eye out for. And when we know who we're teaching, we're able to kind of guide them in this lost art of wonder. Now, something that I often have to do is think about the words that I'm saying to my kids in a ratio. All right. How many questions am I asking and how many commands am I giving? If we're honest with ourselves, usually it's more of the latter, right? Tie your shoes, do your math, get your writing done. Come on, let's get it done. Get it done. Oh, but if we can ask more questions, it models the type of thinking we want our kiddos to have. These build executive function skills like time management. Hey, what would be a good thing to do next if we're trying to get to basketball practice on time? Ooh, now our kiddo is stepping back and saying, well, I have my shoes on my feet, but haven't tied them. Oh, I should tie them, right? See how they arrive at the same point? It may take a couple more seconds, but they're going to be the ones kind of building these skills to say how I can keep on time. How can I keep myself on time? Well, I'm going to need to do these steps, right? And that applies into their learning as well. Asking them questions is a way to model it. And seeking answers. If we have questions or we're in conversation with our kids and we say, I don't know the answer to that. Let's go ahead and look it up. Let's go ahead and find some resources that can help us learn about this. Okay, we're modeling that. And then we're fueled by inquiry-based learning. Usually learning starts with a question, right? How does that work? How does that actually happen? Why does this happen this way? Ask a question. All right, I want to take you back in time a little bit. Story time, sidebar. We're going to go back to 2004. I was in Mr. Henry's AP World History class, and it was history fair time. So similar to the science fair, if you've had experience with that, picture trifold boards and everything. But this was very different because Mr. Henry gave us choice. Some would say too much choice. I think it was awesome. And that's where my current love of learning about all things World War II comes from. I can point back to this moment. So we had a choice first of topic, kind of what we wanted to explore, what interested us in history. Okay. Usually he framed it as a what if. So what if the United States had gotten involved in World War II earlier? Would the outcome of the war have changed? Would the amount of casualties have been lower? Things like that. Whoa. Okay. Well, for somebody who would have said World War II started in 1941, the United States involvement, because that's my background, started in 1941, but it actually started earlier because over in Europe, things are already underway. Oh my word, well, I didn't know that. And so I had to really dig into it. So we're already starting to answer these questions. Then we had the choice of method, how we were going to learn about it. Now, this is 2004, so pre-YouTube, pre lots of online resources, but we did have access to some of those. So I did spend some time in the library. I did interview some people. Both of my grandfathers fought in World War II, and so I was able to talk to them about their experiences. I could read some realistic fiction, historical fiction books that drew on this time period. So I learned things like linguistics, right? Spies who maybe had a little bit of an accent in some way. Wow, that differed in different areas of France. For example, that would be a tell, and show that a spy really wasn't French or vice versa, right? Then we might have economics. Why was rationing necessary? Whoa, I'm getting into economics and linguistics, but this was a history project. That's the thing. Yes, this should make us fist pump and get so excited about the breadth of learning. One more fun thing, architecture. There were things called Anderson shelters that used an arc to make very strong underground shelters during bombing raids. So these types of things all came up throughout my different areas of different methods of learning that I got to choose. And finally, the output. Mr. Henry gave us the opportunity to do different things. So you remember, I was an academically gifted kid, and so I just wrote the essay. I was good at that, okay? I knew that was gonna work. I had some fine art, artistically gifted friends who drew pictures and made sure to include different elements to show what they learned. Another created a diorama. Now, this might translate to my kids making like the setting of a book out of Legos, but these are the types of physical kind of outputs that kids could do. We could think of a playlist, and our student is going to narrate why they chose these different songs based on what they learned. Oh my gosh, the possibilities are endless. So lean into this. Now, I just went through 3 choices, and that's precisely why I love hotel breakfast. I also love French toast, but really, choice is the idea here. So we're giving students the choice of topic. How far deep do you want to go into this? Are you kind of surface level here, or is there something interesting that we can dive deeper into? Like I said before, it doesn't usually stop at the topic that they choose. It usually goes a bit further and they learn about other things. Also, the method of learning. If we were in 2026 and I was doing that same project, I would probably be on Johnny Harris's YouTube channel learning about Swiss bunkers. Yes, that does have to do with World War II. Why are there so many bunkers in Switzerland? Let's get into it. And we might get into geography and alliances and political lines. Whoa, that's pretty cool. All right, that's the method of learning. Now, how to show what I learned. This could look different for every kiddo. They might write an essay or they might choose to draw a picture. Okay, so this is their choice, but we've got some different requirements that we might be operating under as homeschoolers based on the state or location that we're in, right? We definitely need to include some writing. We need to include some speaking. Speaking to peers is one thing, and speaking to an authority or a crowd, that's another thing. Giving them practice at this is really good. However, as homeschoolers, we have the opportunity to go above and beyond. We're going to level up here, and that's where we get to what's needed. All right, so let's go to psychology class just for a second. Stick with me, okay? Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. Think of the bubble, right? This is their safe bubble. And when we kind of level up with our kiddos, we're going to ask them to go a little bit beyond. Not to the point where they feel unsafe and completely exposed, right? We want them to try something new. So for example, if I have a kid who loves to draw and she wants to draw what she learned, that's great. The next time I'm going to push her just a little bit and say, hey, I'd like you to include some captions on your drawings. Maybe we're making like a comic strip this time, okay? And then the next time, maybe we'll do kind of a narrative. So I'm gonna ask you to write your story out. Sure, you can illustrate too, but see how we're kind of growing and getting some of those other skills to improve, okay? We're challenging students, okay? Challenge students just enough to get them to decide on what is the best method, not just what they prefer, but the best method to present their information. A lot of times I'm going to look over here for a second because I've got Bloom's taxonomy right in front of me. I think about this all the time. How can I encourage students to not only evaluate what was good, oh, this was a good choice or a bad choice, but to create an opportunity for their character and their story to make different choices, or to say, you know, this isn't the best method of presentation. I could do a debate. I could create a fictitious podcast and show how this information kind of comes to light, right? So there are so many ways that this can kind of come out. And we're really equipping students with feedback from themselves and from us, as well as self-knowledge that goes way beyond whatever they're learning about in that moment in our home. Okay, so as we wrap up here, I just want to recap what we talked about today. Who we're teaching. You have the privilege to teach with excellence and teach these kiddos under your care in a way that is relevant and good for them. Okay, we're going to also model what it looks like to wonder things, to ask questions, to go out and get curious about things. And then we're going to give them choice, right? Like hotel breakfast, choice in topic, choice in method, and choice in output. And then finally, we're going to look at what's required, what we're actually required to teach, and kind of go beyond. Give them a little bit more of those life skills where they're going to need to look at different topics and resources available to them and say, okay, what's the best way to present what I know? You guys, I hope this was helpful for you. If you have questions or you'd like to continue talking about this topic, I love it and I've seen it work in my homeschool and in our classes. You are welcome to get in touch with me. Head over to thinkcurio.com and get in touch. You guys, if nobody's told you recently, thank you. Thank you for doing what you're doing. It's really important. Happy teaching.